with system, you get speed. With system, you get, of course, faster decision making. But what if the data that you use is not high quality? Think about it. In the past, you just had the data, the financial data, but now, because you have so much more information, you can connect the financial number with behavior, for instance, right? You see the decrease in the sales. You need more and more curiosity and the tools required to put your ideas into practice. Now you have points of data related to consumer behavior. What are they clicking? What type of product are they favoring? Which was very difficult and probably impossible to do at a retail level of a store. And now you have this data. And the question is, how can you move on with better decision making? You have passionate people on different sectors. For instance, you can trace their experience back 20, 30 years ago. So they are the specialists in that field. And now they can, if the experience that they had and the trend that they saw, if you put it in the context with big data, the sky is the limit.
Mr. Chora has an extensive experience in academia as well as in business sector. He has written over 50 scientific articles, attended top conferences around the world, and is a professor at Bucharest University of Economic Studies. In terms of business expertise, Mr. Chora advises Simon Kucher and has a broad knowledge in financial analysis, strategy, and pricing. Welcome to the podcast, teacher.
Thank you very much for inviting me, and I think we can continue calling me Costin. I prefer this.
Sure. Sure. Okay, Costin. So I have a very first question for you. As a professor and expert in this field, can you walk us through your academia and professional journey that led you to specialize in data performance and analytics?
Yeah, well, to be honest, it started when I was in high school, and back then, it was very at the beginning of 2000, so it was quite challenging to find data and to find relevant information. So I remember I was at the economic high school, and there were newspapers, of course, some TV shows. I think only one at that time on related to business, and I remember I was watching it each week. And on the other side, there was this magazine called Capital, which still we can find there. And each Thursday, they were delivering the magazine, and I took it, and then I spent mostly the entire weekend to learn more about companies, to understand markets. So that created the curiosity for numbers. And I saw on the website of a faculty in the Bucharest University of Economic Studies when I was searching for what faculty to pursue, and I saw that one of the faculty had you can become a financial analyst. So it didn't match my thinking back then, but after many years, after starting teaching and being involved in financial analysis, I said, okay, yeah, now I can call myself a financial analyst because in the Bucharest University of Economic Studies, I'm at the Department of Financial Analysis and Valuation. I have very good colleagues, also very good practitioners that can really do both part research, but also consulting work when it comes to numbers.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And what were some key moments or projects that shaped your expertise in this field?
Well, when I started teaching, I soon realized that when you're talking with students, you, of course, have the knowledge to share concepts, to share the theoretical part, but it might be quite challenging if you don't come with case studies and examples. So then I asked myself, okay, how can I find examples? One way was to create different examples from the concept and find information, which I did. On the other side, it was to working in various projects. And I started initially, of course, with scientific projects, moving to finding data and so on through my PhD. And step by step, I got involved in consulting projects which were related on financial analysis with pricing. And it was a process in which I built a lot of let's say knowledge in that, but on the other side I still continue that to be curious and find what's new, because you cannot be certain and say, now I'm an expert in that field. No, everything is changing, and that creates the premises to better be ready for, by the way, what you are doing now, right, with your app is, and learning how can you use the amount of data that you can have and take proper decisions. Maybe you use it for research, maybe you use it for really understanding a sector or a business, but you need more and more curiosity and the tools required to put your ideas into practice.
Mhm, mhm. And what are the challenges that you face early in your career? And maybe you can tell us how did you overcome them?
Well, again, coming back to data, I
Mhm,
remember it was time and data, right? So data was quite challenging to find back then. Of course, I did my PhD on performance analysis through value creation for companies listed at the stock exchange. So I was a little bit lucky, because with stock exchange companies, you can listed at the stock exchange, you can find data quite easily. But still, it was quite challenging to take all the information, to find it. Sometimes there were differences that you can find in the public records versus what you could find at the stock exchange information. So it was quite tricky. And I remember I spent 3 months during my PhD studies at the Dauphine University in Paris. And that was a very good time to work and take some time to work on the data set that I built. And the first thing that I did, that was one of the challenge, was creating a structure to use when searching for the data. Because
mhm,
sometimes, we are looking at the data, but the question is, what is that, we can say, template in which you add all the information. So back then you had only Excel. Now you can use AI, you can use apps like yours. But then I had, first of all, I remember I spent like a couple of days, even more, to build like a template in which I gather all the information, because I had around 20 companies, and the amount of data was like 5 years for some variables, the main variables, and 10 years for the other. So quite a lot of information that I had to gather. And the first step was, okay, I gather the data, but where do I put the data? And I had to do it manually. So that was really challenging, right? To do this exercise in which you don't have a template to put in, then figure it out where to find the quality data. And third, this process of manually inputting, which can bring a lot of errors. So I think these are the three
mhm.
challenges that I faced.
And at the moment, how would you define the big data and why is so critical for a business to use big data in their activity, for example?
Mhm. Well, let's think about, okay, what do we have in front of us? First of all, when we're talking of big data, it's like going specific in a sector, in a area. But if we look at what big data leads to, is it actually leads to better decision making. So now companies, on one side, companies are investing a lot into modalities to capture the data, right? We have more and more ways in which companies capture data. If we think about the evolution of getting the data, it really amplified when companies switched to online, right? Think about a retailer that moves into e-commerce. Now you have points of data related to consumer behavior. What are they clicking? What type of product are they favoring? Which was very difficult and probably impossible to do at the retail level of a store. And now you have this data. And the question is, how can you move on with better decision making? And that becomes part of the data driven decision making mindset that we should have, because otherwise, yeah, we are stuck at the opinion based decision making, and we don't take into consideration the information. And I want to give you one example here. In a different podcast, I had a chance to interview Radu Savopol, the founder of the coffee chain Five to Go. And he said that now, because they have a huge amount of information from their coffee shops, they can predict how much the revenue will drop if it's raining, right? So it's raining, they know exactly what the revenue drop. So imagine the possibilities now when you can make use of all of this data. And it's fascinating sometimes that on one side, businesses are investing money into data, but on the other side, they are not actually, maybe at the internal level, they are not really using the data at the maximum capacity.
What do you think are the biggest misconceptions about data that businesses should be aware of?
Well, we're relying on technology, right? And the technology gives you insight. And but there is a challenge there related to the data, right? We are counting on system that will analyze this large amount of information, and we might rely too much on that. So the question would be also the initial phases of the where the data is collected. I think this is one of the challenges that businesses face. How accurate the data first, how accurate the data is, and on the other side, what type of recommendation we might get even with this maybe new AI systems that will help us understand data. So one of the challenges that I see is the reliability of or the trust that businesses are putting into the systems and the data that is there without checking. I think more and more jobs of quality data assurance or something like that will appear, because you have, right? And there was an image, by the way, which was very interesting. There is a video which shows the dynamic of the floor, the trading floor at the New York Stock Exchange in the 80s, which was crowded. It was noisy. You had many traders there. They were talking, negotiating with each other. So very noisy. And on the other side, you have the image now in 2024, which is with very few people, systems all over. And now here, if you look from in that, of course, from what was in the 80s to what is now, with system you get speed. With system you get, of course, faster decision making. But what if the data that you use is not high quality? How will that affect the conclusions of the system, but on the other side your decision making? And I think this is something that companies should invest more and more. And this is, for instance, a job that maybe should be more reflected in the future. Have people that really check the accuracy of the data and the data source, and maybe not relying that much, even if it's an important data source, checking again what is this transition from that source to the main system.
Yeah, regarding the data quality, there is a statement, garbage in, garbage out.
Exactly, exactly, exactly. And I think that what you mentioned about data sweep is really important, because now you're putting in reliable sources, right? And that creates the premises to have good analysis, and then you to have good decision making, because you're informed, but now you know that the source of information is really relevant. So I think people will have to rely on actually uh, filtering the sources of data, and not just taking, I have some statistics. There are many statistics thrown out there in which you get some conclusion, but if you check the source of data, it's not reliable, or it's a conclusion. And we people are biased. We have these cognitive biases when it comes to conclusions, right? One of it is the confirmation bias. So it's enough to see a statistic that maybe is general or maybe some on a specific situation, and then you point out and you have general conclusion on that. And then there is another bias that we have, which is thinking, black and white thinking. meaning that we jump to conclusions. And that means that I might not think about the sources of data. I might not check for more data because why? I'm rushing to find a conclusion and I'm rushing to the next decision making. And here, I think big data will be relevant and tools like yours because you can use, now you can take faster decisions, but on a reliable source.
Mm-hmm.
And that will change how businesses operate. I really think that some businesses really understand that they are faster. They are moving faster. They can now you can connect different variables that you never thought of, and you can take up to date decision making that are reflected in the way at the end of a fiscal year. You can see that in the financial statements. In financial analysis, what we do is go back. So we think that financial analysis, like the financial statements is the back cover of a book, right? When you take a new book, maybe you go to the back cover to read a little bit about it, right? I don't know if it happened to you.
It happened a lot. It happened in the past, actually.
Yeah. So then what you do is you look at that, and what I do, for instance, I look at the back cover and then I go back, see the content, and maybe take a look inside the book. That's the same with financial analysis in financial statements. At the end of the year, you see this story that happened. You see the result, the conclusion of a year, right? But if you go back, and this is what we're doing in financial analysis, we actually learn the story behind the numbers. And this is the name of one of a project that I launched with articles about different sectors. And think about it, in the past, you just had the data, the financial data. But now, because you have so much more information, you can connect the financial number with behavior, for instance, right? You see the decrease in the sales, but then you know how people are doing, right? Maybe salespeople, consumers,
Mhm.
what is happening. And that creates a different dynamic.
Regarding the analysis part, how can advanced analytics be applied to improve financial analysis and decision making process in the corporate field? Because I think it's very important that data usage in the corporate field to help decision makers to take better decisions.
Well, first of all, organizations and of course investors are watching every aspect of what organizations are doing. But it is really important to evaluate different risks, right? So you can um, get information and see how a specific risk will affect what is happening in the business. And we had this situation right during the pandemic time when organizations moved right from yeah, we are this in a global landscape, everything is okay. Now you have the health challenge. So now you have a variable which is number of cases, and that's a new variable. If the number of cases surpass a certain level, then you have restrictions. Those restrictions will impact the business environment. For instance, in Romania, we had like this restriction for cinemas, in which in a cinema you couldn't have more than 30% occupancy rate. Well, a cinema doesn't reach break even with 30% occupancy. So now at the maximum level, I'm not even on break even. So why should that open? So there were some cinema chains that didn't open. So my point is that you can assess the risk. On the other side, you can assess and you can use it for trends. So now you can see a pattern. And the more dynamic the data is and up to date, you can take real time decisions. And why not? In the end, you look at opportunities. So the opportunities that opening a new business, seeing the trends. For instance, in Romania, we have aging population. This is a trend, but now you can go even at the more granular level and get, okay, we have a population which is aging, but how many have, I know they spend on something, and retailers have this information, right? Because they have uh, apps and they can track now and learn the consumer behavior. What am I buying? And now I can make customized, right, offers. And this is the trend, customized offers to people. And then I can increase my margin just because I targeted you, Cosmin. I
Mhm.
know your consumer behavior. I offer you something that you need at the right time. And then I trigger a sales point. And that creates, of course, there are some limits now. Of course, if you think about it, okay, what is related to privacy? Will I accept that? Will I accept, for instance, we are talking about plane tickets, right? And with plane tickets, we can see dynamic pricing, we can see changes, and we accept it. But would we accept like a grocery store doing the same, changing prices in real time based on the need and based on the, I know that at a certain level, people that come from, they end their day and they come from their job and do some shopping, they are willing to pay more for this type of product. So this faces this type. You have the infrastructure, you have the data. You'll have businesses face some dilemmas, which is no, should I do it? What will be the public reaction? And but it's an ongoing conversation. So overall, there's a lot of possibilities opening up, and those companies that invest now, and that's why the academic sector is important, because academic sector and researcher, right? They can come. It can come with analysis that can faster, streamline all of these variables, and they can put the time right. So it's a the academic sector, and this is what I see in terms of research in my university as well. You have passionate people on different sectors. For instance, you can trace their experience back 20, 30 years ago. So they are the specialists in that field. And now they can, if the experience that they had and the trend that they saw, if you put it in the context with big data, the sky is the limit. For instance, I'm trying now to build with some colleagues at the university more research into how private label, right? So product that you can find in different store under their brand, right? How private, so or own store label is impacting retail sales. And it's very difficult to find this type of information. So
I know.
imagine if organization, retailers will open, right, their data, which, right, to this type of research. How will, maybe their decision making be after that?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Regarding the data, it's very important the story behind the data. So my last question for you is the following one. How important is understanding the story behind the numbers, teacher?
So this is one of my quest. I might call it like that.
Mhm.
When we're using brands, when we're using companies, we're using services of companies, and we know, for instance, you go and you take a coffee from Five to Go, right?
Yeah.
Or you go and you have lunch at a restaurant, or you go to your favorite retailer and get a brand. Now you're connected to that brand and you know the product. And on the other side, what I saw that is, especially with students and professionals that were, I had the chance to meet, it is always fascinating when you put, right, you put this dimension, which is the numbers. And now I can talk about, let's say, I don't know, McDonald's or Starbucks or Five to Go, not only from the product level. I can go deeper and see their impact in a specific country, or why not globally, if it's a global analysis. So understanding the story means that you can connect better. There are entrepreneurs in which I think the entrepreneurial level, this is really common. After that, when the business is moving upwards, you get the gap. What am I saying? The entrepreneurs know their business from the product service level because they are involved, especially those that are involved. Let's suppose that we have an entrepreneur that open a food truck. He is there. He knows how much he sells. He knows the expenses. So he knows everything about that. So he can connect the story with the numbers. On the other side, when businesses are growing, and then you get new people and you get the layers, the gap becomes even bigger. And I tell you one experience in which I had a training in finance for non-finance with an organization in which the salespeople saw, uh, let's suppose, I'm just throwing numbers here, 70% in their margin, but the finance people are saying, no, it is 14%. And there is this gap. Why? Because the finance people include all the costs, including the fixed expenses. The salespeople were seeing only their cost of sales, so they didn't see the entire information. So what am I saying here is that the more the organization grows, the bigger the need for understanding and connecting the story behind the numbers. That's why they invest, right, in training people, learning about their customers. Why? Because there is a lack of information. So if, for instance, to conclude with this, if your tool can do that, I think you will be also very successful in helping organizations.
Thank you, teacher, for your all answers. And for you, you can go to check DataSweep and go and search for variables and merging data sets. Thank you and see you next time.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
You're welcome.